Welcome in, everyone. Welcome in. Whenever you are listening to, I always say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because some people listen when they're on the road, when they're in the gym, when they're doing laundry, or cooking, whatever the case is, or you're just hanging out on your couch and you're listening to another episode of That 70s Pod. That is That 70s Pod right here on YouTube every week with Bryan Lee and myself, Andrew. This is episode number 62. It is hot, hot, hot everywhere. Al Gore was onto something because it is in the 90s, any state that I end up in the past 2 weeks. But speaking of states, Wisconsin, Bryan is there. He is outside his outside studio. Bryan, how are you on this fine Tuesday evening as we're recording?
Well, the past 5 days in western Wisconsin have been pretty good. Actually, it's been in the 70s. It hasn't been real humid, and just gorgeous, beautiful days. And do you think I got out and mowed my lawn any of those 5 days? Absolutely not.
Nope.
So now my grass is long, and now we're back to being hot again. I walked outside at 6 o'clock this morning to my car to go to work, and it was humid and uncomfortable. And I thought, when did this happen? It's well, what happened to the gorgeous 5 days that we had? And I think it got up to 90, 92 today. And like I said, the humidity is back, and we have threatening showers and stuff. That's more later tonight, maybe tomorrow. That's going to happen. So um, yeah, right now though, it's late. It's well after dinner time right now, so it's cooler, and there is a nice breeze. So I think I'll be able to sit in my outdoor studio, Andrew, and do the show today. As it is rather windy. You can maybe hear the wind coming across the speaker. You could hear my wind chimes on my patio deck, and here we go. We're gonna talk a little bit more today of the 70s, of course, about grandparents. And I'll tell you why I thought of doing an episode about grandparents in just a moment. But first, I want to say that last week we talked about the All-Star game, and I made several references to the game being in Colorado. And it turned out it wasn't in Colorado at all. It was in Atlanta. And I think the reason I got it mixed up is because I follow the Minnesota Twins, as everybody knows, and I had heard on the radio that the two twin representatives in the All-Star game, Byron Buxton and Joe Ryan, would be going to Colorado. And so I thought the All-Star game was in Colorado, but what they were referring to was that they would be rejoining the rest of their teammates in Colorado once the second half of the season resumed on Friday. So here I thought the All-Star game was in Colorado. My apologies for that, for anyone that got excited about that. The game was actually in Atlanta, where Byron Buxton and Joe Ryan both participated for the American League. The game ended in a 6-6 tie, and then they implemented a new rule of having a home run contest until there was a winner. It's kind of like a shootout in hockey after the overtime period to decide the game. So the National League wound up winning. They won the home run contest at the end of the nine-inning affair. So exciting All-Star game. It was kind of fun to watch. And then the Minnesota Twins and the rest of baseball resumed play on Friday last weekend, and the Twins were in Colorado. So that's how I got all that mixed up. But I just wanted to clarify that. And before we start today's topic, which is about grandparents.
And congrats to Cal Riley, who won from the Seattle Mariners. He won the home run derby. And that's actually crazy because I was in Atlanta when we were recording, and I had no idea. It was already busy in Atlanta itself. I had no idea the All-Star break was starting as soon as I left. But yeah, you're wearing your Colorado Rockies t-shirt. And we always enjoy talking about baseball. It's an old pastime. And speaking of old pastimes, like we did the family pet. We did an episode about your brother. And then you wanted to do grandparents last week. And then because of the All-Star break, we touched on that because it was current, like topical. So
Well, I was talking to somebody at work today, just one last thing about baseball, and uh, and he said that the Twins are playing the Dodgers in Los Angeles this week. Now, they matter of fact, Byron Buxton, who I just mentioned, had the first homer of the year off of Shohei Ohtani, the international superstar that plays for the Dodgers. He was pitching last night, and Buxton hit a solo homer off him to start the game. That's the first homer Ohtani has given up this year, and he didn't pitch last year. So it's been a while since he's given up a home run. So that was kind of cool. And my friend anyway said that Dodger Stadium would be one of the stadiums that he would like to visit. And we've talked about this before, Andrew, that uh, there are several baseball stadiums that I would like to visit someday. Wrigley Field in Chicago, Fenway in Boston, uh, Dodger Stadium. Uh, there's a handful of historic ones. Unfortunately, Yankee Stadium is no more. Uh, the new Yankee Stadium is not the old Yankee Stadium, and I wish I would have gotten to see the old Yankee Stadium that Babe Ruth built. Uh, Fortunately, I did get to see Candlestick Park in San Francisco before they tore that down and made their new stadium up there or out there. So I am very proud to say that I was at Candlestick Park in San Francisco back in the day, back in the early 80s. Uh, but I guess my question to you, Andrew, is uh, you're I guess a moderate baseball fan. Is there any baseball park that you would like to go to?
Because I work for the Buccaneers, I can see like I know where like the Devil Rays play. So like I guess I could go to the Tampa Stadium. But the two stadiums I always want to go to, like obviously as a kid was the Metrodome, I did that. And then the moment I moved to Houston, where I'm actually at right now, Minute Maid Park where the Astros played, I thought looked so cool. And I went to that. So the only one I could really think of, we just talked about this and now I forgot. The one with the water fountain. Is that Kansas City?
Oh yeah,
The Royals?
I think it's called Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City.
So yeah, I would like to go see. I would like to be in that the Royals baseball field or ballpark. Um, if I had to pick three, it would be that Senko Field in Seattle, and then I I guess Red Sox, like where they play, just to go in there because that's built so like there's something
Weird.
about that building that's really cool. Like maybe like the Cubs. But if I had to pick three, yeah, I would like to see the Kansas City Royals in their stadium, Seattle, and then Fenway, right? Boston.
Fenway. Yep.
Because I was in Boston once upon a time, and I went to the Cheers, the bar from the TV show Cheers, and then we drove by, or the whatever car I was in or Uber, like we drove by Fenway Park, and just like seeing the building, it looked really cool. But that's about it. Like I'm not really trying to hit every stadium. Um, or more so like NFL stadiums, like football stadiums. If I had to do a top three, I want to see Vikings, like US Bank Stadium. I would like to be at Lambeau Field just because of how historic that is. Like I want to go there when it's cold, not snowing, but like when it's cold, I would like to go Lambeau Field. And then, man, I can't even think of the last one if I had to pick three of them. Allegiant Field, maybe. Or no, not Allegiant Field. Is it Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play?
I think they still call it that. Yeah.
Yeah, probably that. Actually, you know what? Arrowhead. I would like to, again, Kansas City. Not a Chiefs fan, but I remember always seeing the highlights of Chief games and like that stadium and that environment looks really cool. You know,
Well,
so
don't let your brother hear you say that you're not a Chiefs fan.
I'm
As uh,
I don't just jump on the bandwagon because the team is good. I didn't mind the Chiefs back in the day when we went to the Chiefs training camp, but like when too much is too much, I'm always gonna be loyal. But nowadays, I really only care to see the Vikings do well. as like a kid inside me, but working for the Buccaneers, I want to see the Buccaneers like make it to the playoffs in the Super Bowl because I would work for that. Because I don't really pay attention to like I don't really care for like as much seeing Miami do that well or the Bengals like I maybe once did. So yeah, I would like to go to stadiums, but I only really care for the Vikings. Um, Man, you and I know how to get off on a tangent when it comes to sports. I do want to ask you this though. Episode 62 is what we're filming today. Back in November, we did a Thanksgiving episode, and then December, we did a Christmas episode. I bring those up because that's the first time you really, you kind of talked about your grandparents, but you actually talked about going to your grandparents. I believe in Star Prairie. And then today, when you were talking about doing a family dog episode and then your older brother, like, hey, there's a lot of things that were around my life, but what about just my life specifically? So today, when we're talking about having grandparents in the 70s or grandparents in general, what makes you think of this? Like, I guess what pops in your, excuse me, wow, what pops in your mind first, when it comes to doing like a full episode on growing up with grandparents?
Well, we'll do our best to have a full episode. Um, but I think I have enough material, enough memories in the old memory bank. Um, the reason the idea came to the forefront, Andrew, is one of the one of the sitcoms that your mother and I are stuck on right now is a show called The Goldbergs. The Goldbergs is a show about a family of five in in the 1980s in Philadelphia. And for those of you that haven't seen it, it's a wonderful show. It's based on a lot of true stories. As the creator and producer of the show was a kid growing up in the 80s, and he basically took his life growing up and his parents and his brothers and so forth, and made a show out of it. And like I said, a lot of it's based on true things. But there's a grandpa in the show, played by the wonderful George Siegel, who has passed away. And George Siegel is this kid's best friend, Adam Goldberg, who the show is about, and who wound up growing up to be a real live TV producer. His best friend was his grandpa. And so I got to thinking, I don't know if I could ever say that my grandpa was my best friend, but I certainly considered him a friend. Um, I had two grandpas for the first 13 years of my life. Maybe it was longer than that, 15 years. Uh, my older grandpa, uh, who was my mom's dad, died in 1976 when I was 14 years old. Maybe I was 15. Uh, and he was quite old when he passed away. He still lived on the farm in Osceola. He was 93 years old, and I mean, pretty much all of my life, Andrew, that guy was in his 80s. So, you know, I only knew him when we would visit the farm, and he would always be doing chores. I remember one time I got into his pail of ice cream, and I don't think he was real happy about that, but he didn't say anything uh, because he had this pail of vanilla Land O'Lakes ice cream. And anybody who's from the Upper Midwest knows the Land O'Lakes name. It's a tried and true label that people still abide by to this day. Uh, and it was really good ice cream, but I think he was upset I got into his ice cream. And his nickname for me was Hit the Puppy. And I don't know where that came from or what that meant. I think I asked my mom once what that meant, and I don't remember if she told me or if she gave it a guess because she didn't really know. But what a weird nickname to give a little kid. Hit the puppy. Like, why would you want to hit a puppy? You know, unless I'm misunderstanding what he was saying, because he was an old guy, and at times he was hard to understand. But I really don't have a lot of memories of that grandpa, but the grandpa and grandma that I want to talk about on the show today were in Star Prairie, Wisconsin. Um, Star Prairie is only 3 blocks long, and Andrew, I've showed you and your siblings where they used to live. It's kind of at the end of the main drag. I make that sound like it's a mile long. In Star Prairie, the house is still there. My grandparents have been gone a long, long time, but I absolutely love my grandpa. His name was Whiff. It was short for Wilfred, and everyone in town knew this guy. Um, he only had one arm. When he was a young man, he got his arm caught in a corn picker and wound up losing the arm. So he only had one arm for most of his life. And but man, that guy could work. That guy knew how to get around not having a right arm. He could fish. He drove. He knew how to roof. By that I mean he would get up on a roof and help reshingle the roof. He would have a nail in his mouth. He would have a bunch of nails in his mouth, and he'd put his hammer down. He would take the nail out of his mouth with his left hand and jam it. I mean, jam it into the shingle. Pick up his hammer and pound the nail in. Put the hammer down. Take the next nail out of his mouth. Jam it into the shingle. Pick up the hammer and slam that nail in. And the guy was just amazing.
Wait, I would
Yeah.
see you do stuff growing up. Maybe not with shingles, but I remember seeing you put nails in your mouth. Is that where you got that from?
Uh, yeah, probably. Because I don't remember seeing my dad do that, so I must have got it from somewhere. Um, but I don't know if I ever told you that story about my grandpa, but that was just one of the amazing things that guy could do with one arm.
You did during our Thanksgiving episode, you did mention that about the roofing thing with the nails in the mouth. But you also talked about like when we did the fishing with your dad episode, that your dad taught you how to catch bait, the worms, fish, and all that stuff. Is there anything specific that you remember your grandma or grandpa teaching you?
Well, my grandpa, like most grandpas, he had this beautiful garden,
Okay.
um, and he would let me go in the garden and pick a carrot, um, because I always thought it was so cool, Andrew, to that food was actually growing in the ground. I mean, I was a little kid, I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and we didn't really have a garden in St. Paul. It just wasn't conducive to having a garden in St. Paul, where it could be vandalized or what have you. So going out and seeing this garden in Wisconsin, and it was a beautiful garden. I mean, older retired people probably have the best gardens you're ever going to see. They know how to do it. They're out there weeding the garden every day and using rakes and hoes and whatever they need to do. And one time my grandpa he said, go in and pick a carrot. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I knew the carrot was in the ground because I used to watch Bugs Bunny cartoons, so I figured that part out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, of
yeah,
course. Yeah. That's how we
so
all learn. Like,
yeah, it's like and so he showed me how to do it, and he said, now you pick one, and he said you're going to want to pick one where you can see that the roots are thicker, because if you pull one where the root is really thin, then you're just going to get this little tiny carrot, like a baby carrot. Um, and I wanted a big carrot, so he showed me how to pull it out of the ground, and be careful, because if you pull the root too fast or too hard, then it's going to break off and the carrot's going to be stuck in the ground. So he showed me how to pull it out, and I got it out of there, and it was a fairly decent sized carrot. And he said, now before you eat it, you got to wash it off. So he brought me around to the back of the house where there was a hose hooked up to the nozzle on the back of the house, and he said, okay, turn on the water and just work the mud off or work the dirt off with your hands and clean it the best you can. And so I did that, and he said, now you can eat it. So I sat down, and I don't know where my grandpa went, but I sat down on the steps and ate my carrot. And I was so proud that I had food that you didn't have to go to the store to purchase. And I was just sitting there on my grandpa's front steps eating a carrot that I pulled out of the ground, and I was just so proud of myself that I got food on my own. Well, thanks to my grandpa.
When it comes to, I'm sorry, I missed this part. Is this your dad's parents or your mom's parents?
Yeah, no, yeah. This would be my dad's parents. Uh, they lived in Star Prairie, and my grandma passed away um, in early 1987, and it was right after I got married. Matter of fact, because we she couldn't come to our wedding. We invited her and grandpa to the wedding, but they couldn't come because she was sick with cancer at the time. And then she wound up passing away in I want to say April or May of '87. It would have been about 3 months before your older brother was born. And then uh, my grandpa passed away a couple of years after that. I think it was in 1989. So your oldest brother Brett is the only one who actually was held or got to see my grandpa. So um, that would have been his great grandpa. So your older brother was the only one that uh, got to be or got to experience, even though he doesn't remember it, a great grandparent. None of the rest of you guys got to experience that. So, and we do have a four-generation picture somewhere in the archives of my grandpa, my dad, me, and then my oldest son, Brett.
So we haven't talked about your mom's mom yet.
Well, she passed away when my mom was two.
Gotcha.
So I never knew her. My mom never knew her. So my mom actually grew up being raised by her five sisters. My mom was the baby, and they had a large family of seven or eight kids, I think, and my mom's mom, I believe, was pregnant for an eighth or ninth time when she passed away. Uh, all those births were out at the farm in Osceola. So my mom wound up growing up without a mother and was raised by her sisters, her older sisters. So um, yeah, she never had a mom. So my mom had to be a mom without having any experience being raised by a mom. So she did a pretty good job. But that's not what our topic is about today. It's about grandparents, and I've got lots of stories to share. So besides my grandpa roofing with one arm, or teaching me how to snag a carrot out of the garden.
So that's why we're here. We're talking because you had stories about your brother, right? When we filmed 2 or 3 weeks ago on Bruce, and you talked about stories, but you also talked about the impact that you had growing up with just one brother. So we're going to talk about the impact of growing up with just one pair of grandparents. But you mentioned like Thanksgiving. So you brought up like the smells of your grandma's cooking and stuff that she would bake. But is there a specific like if you had to pinpoint one thing about your grandparents, is there something that you remember or like because with my grandparents, like your mom and dad, obviously I knew your mom well. I only saw your dad once for like a really short period of time when I was a kid. But then my mom's parents, who lived in Minnesota, I had more memories of them as a kid. But and then as I was like a teenager on, it was more memories of just your mom. And there's like specifically like playing a football, like throwing a football outside. Um, And like that's it. Like I really don't remember like a lot. Like there's random stories and like pictures and videos I've seen, but like that's kind of like my point. Like you have more elaborate stories, I feel like, of your grandparents because my mom's dad would play football with us outside every now and then. He would throw the football right at our face, like all the time. Like every single throw was like ripping skin off of our face. So we had to like get our hands up there. He's like, well, yeah, that's how the pros play. Like they use their hands. And then he would always do this game where he had like a fake fruit snack or like a fake candy. Like, do you want the orange one or do you want the blue one? And like we were picking nothing out of his hand. But like I remember that. And then my grandma, my mom's mom, would make these sprinkle cookies with like rainbow sprinkles and they always had like this white Tupperware that they would put it in. And other than like birthday cards and all, that is legit it that I remember of my grandparents growing up. There's probably other memories here and there of like being at their house and their pool table and the laundry chute and stuff like that that we would mess around with, but interacting with them and learning from them wasn't really a thing. So like, do you actually have more elaborate stories of like memories that you spent one-on-one with your grandma and grandpa growing up?
Well, I can remember um, several times. You mentioned the holidays, and we've already touched on those when we talked about Thanksgiving, and we talked about Christmas because we spent a lot of those holidays at my grandma and grandpa's house at Star Prairie, and yeah, walking in the back door and all those wonderful smells would hit you as soon as you walk in the door of fresh cinnamon rolls or pies. It seemed like my grandparents were retired as long as I can remember. So I can always remember my grandma making something or baking. I mean, she always had cookies or bars or something going on. And my grandpa was always busy with something, whether it was in the garden or he was a carpenter by trade when he was a young man. So, I mean, he knew how to build things, he knew how to fix things. For a while, and again, with one arm, I don't know how he did it, but he used to make these wishing wells. And to this day, Andrew, I still have a broken down dilapidated wishing well in my front yard as we speak right now on the other side of the house. That wishing well was built by my grandpa. And the reason I won't throw that away, even though it's broken in half and falling apart, is because my grandpa made that. And I can't part with it. I know someday I'm gonna have to, but but he made these wonderful wishing wells by himself with one arm. I don't know how he did it, but that wishing well, Andrew, is about 50 years old, and that's why it's falling apart. And it's memories like that where I would always see him putzing with something, and whether I mean he built, I think he built mailboxes for a while. And he always had some kind of hobby he was doing, and he had all these wonderful gadgets and tools in his garage, and he would let me look at stuff, but he was real careful in not letting me pick up anything that might be too dangerous or sharp or whatever. Um, and he had this rhubarb patch. Now, for those of you in the South that don't know what rhubarb is, it's this wild plant, um, and it has these big monster green leaves, and it's sort of this long red stem. And some people just think it's a weed, but it's actually food. And so once again, he showed me, how to pull this out of the yard. And he said, don't eat the green leaf because that'll kill you. It's poison. I don't know if it is or not, but all he had to say, he just had to tell me that once. And he said, you break off the leaf and break it down far enough so you're not going to get any of the leaf. And then he said, on the other end, make sure you break off the stem where it came out of the ground because he said that doesn't taste any good. But you still had a pretty good length of rhubarb. And and again, he said, go wash it off. Make sure you get all the dirt off of it and stuff. And there might be bugs on it or whatever, and then just eat it. And I remember biting into rhubarb for the first time, Andrew, and I probably made this awful face because eating rhubarb fresh out of the ground is really sour.
It's tart.
And and a lot of people, a lot of older people, my grandpa used to eat raw rhubarb at the table with sugar. He would sprinkle sugar on it to kind of neutralize that bitter taste. But I would just sit and eat the rhubarb on the front step at my grandpa's house, and once I got used, I liked it. I would eat rhubarb just by itself, and to this day, I haven't had it for a while, but one of my favorite bars is is rhubarb bars. Um, I don't really like rhubarb cake or rhubarb bread or anything. I was just telling a coworker this the other day. I said, if you ever make anything for me, you know, I'm okay with cake and breads, but bars are like my favorite thing. And so she made me banana bars, which were really good. Um, but I said, like, if you make something out of rhubarb, make sure it's rhubarb bars because I'll gobble those up. And rhubarb bars are, especially if you mix it with strawberries, probably one of the best bars you could ever have.
Oh my gosh, rhubarb. I was just talking, I don't know if it was to my girlfriend or a coworker. I was just talking about rhubarb because that's something like I forget about until I just hear it because rhubarb pie and rhubarb crisp were something that my mom would make a lot because in the first house I grew up in, the yellow house, I totally forgot about this. We had rhubarb that would grow out behind the garage.
Yep.
And so we would rip it out like when we saw that it was red. Never ate the leaves. And then like we would take the hose and like rinse it off. And then yeah, we would just eat that. And it's not sour for our listeners. It's kind of like tart. It kind of has a tarty taste to it, is like a better way to describe the
Yeah,
initial.
but it's bitter though. It's a bitter tart, and until you acquire a taste for it, and maybe that's why a lot of people don't like rhubarb, is because they don't really give it a chance. But once you get past that bitterness, it's really good.
So we moved out to the country. And so we lived in a house for a long time. So rhubarb and like yellow dandelions is something we saw a lot in that house. So when we moved out to the country, there wasn't that much dandelions. And then one day we're out by the septic tank. And my older brother Brett, how you mentioned earlier, he's like, "Oh, rhubarb. This was not red at all." But he pulled the lawn thing out, took a bite of it. And so my brother Eric and I still reenact this sometimes. Oh, rhubarb. And then he like spits it out and almost like throws up. Like we remember hearing that crunch and just seeing the look on his face because definitely something he probably shouldn't have been ingested, um, or digested, that is. And yeah, how he chucked that was hilarious. But I only like rhubarb as it was. I never like rhubarb pie. I still really don't like pie to this day. And rhubarb crisp, it was too much. Like the bitter, it kind of had a salty, sugary taste at the same time. But when you mentioned a garden, you said was your dad gardening stuff to sell it, or would he then bring it into your grandma or your grandpa? Would he then bring it inside for her to make stuff out of it?
Well, here's the wonderful thing, Andrew, is people of that generation. They grew up during the Great Depression in the
Oh,
1920s, 1930s. So anything that you raised, whether it was a garden or livestock, I mean, that was your food. If you had chickens, the eggs were your food. You weren't selling them to. You didn't have a sign at the end of your driveway saying eggs for sale. I mean, that was your food. And if they butchered a pig, they would they would save every part of that pig for something. Um, uh, years later, not to gross you out, but there used to be something called blood sausage, and I didn't realize when I tried it. I actually thought it was pretty good, but I didn't realize when I tried it that it was actual pig blood that was in this stuff. And the Bible tells us you're not supposed to eat blood from animals, and so. I didn't know that when I was a kid, so I would never do it now. But that was just the generation. You didn't grow vegetables to sell them. You grew them to survive. And they grew tomatoes, and they would can tomatoes and make tomato juice or pasta sauce. And they would can all that stuff, Andrew, and put it down in their cellar, which was underground. Um,
Can or a
uh,
jar?
I'm sorry,
A can or a jar?
a jar.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, when I say can, uh, that's just a term that they use for preserving stuff. Some people call it preserves. Um, I don't remember that they made jelly or jams or anything like that because I don't remember that they had grapes or plums or berries or anything like that. Um, uh, but it was mostly preserving food like green beans and peas, and they would freeze all that stuff. Uh, Other stuff that you couldn't freeze, like tomatoes or carrots or whatever, you would store in jars. Um, they would Cucumbers. That was another one. They would make pickles. They knew how to make homemade pickles, where you you would grow the cucumbers, and you'd pick the cucumbers before they got real big, when just little guys, and put them in a jar, and put vinegar and dill and whatever else you put in it, and and seal the jar, and then I don't know how many months you have to let that sit, but yeah, they would make their own pickles from the garden. So it was amazing, Andrew. They had every kind of thing, even things that are disgusting like beets and parsnips. And for people out there that think beets are good, more power to you, but don't ever feed me a beet, um, even though they're good for you. So yeah, they did it for survival, because I can remember, at Thanksgiving, it's like, okay, here's some fresh green beans, and I'm going, what do you mean fresh green beans? Your garden's been has been done for months now, and it's the middle of winter, and they said, well, they were frozen, but they were fresh out of the garden, and we froze them, but now here they are. And it's okay. Well, I guess that's an acceptable answer, for a little kid. Um, so that's your answer, Andrew. Is that was the generation. You grew up,
Uh,
and you everything that you grew or raised, whether it's animals or vegetables or fruit. Um, I can remember they had an apple tree, and they would make homemade applesauce. Even though I never really liked that because I didn't think there was enough sugar. Um, but yeah, they knew how to do everything because that's how they were raised, and that's how they raised my parents. Unfortunately, um, I never really wanted to learn how to do any of that, and I wish I had because it would be nice to have that talent now, and I don't. Um, and it's
like
really
to
a
make,
dying generation.
like to make stuff like from scratch, like applesauce. You never saw her make it or anything?
No, no, and I wish I had because that's basically a dying art,
It is.
where people would make well, your relative Iris, who passed away a couple of years ago, she was still doing stuff like that. Not towards the end, but like maybe 10, 15 years ago, where she was making jams and stuff. And that's really it's a dying thing, where that generation is passing away or has passed away, and the people uh, that that should have learned how to do it never did. I'm one of them. I never learned how to do it, and I wish I had.
Um, I'm curious because I looked up parsnips. Um, do you remember eating these plain, or was there something that they made them into?
My mom used to pan fry those,
Okay.
uh, like, like they were uh, like they were potatoes.
Oh,
And
okay.
she would just pan fry them in butter, and they were the nastiest things. Um, my mom fed my brother and I a lot of crap, and when I say that, um,
What do you mean?
maybe I don't have the appreciation uh,
Okay.
because growing up as a kid, my parents didn't have a lot of money, and whenever we went to Wisconsin to visit the grandparents, my parents would bring back whatever free food they could get, whether it was fish or or holy cow, there's like four rabbits in my yard just having a meeting. They're all in a group. Anyway, so my parents would bring back whatever, and rutabagas and parsnips and just weird stuff. Something called head cheese, and my parents grew up on that stuff. So they knew what it tastes like. They were fine eating it. But then when they fed it to my brother and I, my brother and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So we didn't always appreciate what was put on the table before us, but we also didn't realize that sometimes that was it. That's all the food that we had for that day, um, or for that week, because uh, we were we weren't impoverished, but we were on the certainly on the low end, the low on the low income scale of people growing up in the Twin Cities. I mean, we weren't in poverty by any means, but we weren't middle class. We were probably maybe lower middle class, but we just didn't always have money for food. So whatever my parents brought back for free from Wisconsin, we had to eat it.
They did they make I'm looking up head cheese. I've never heard this before. Did they make that homemade or they would buy it like that? Because there's no
Well,
cheese in this.
yeah, yeah. There's no cheese in it. It's basically, again, that's from butchering a pig, and I'm not sure what's all in it. It's just it's kind of all the parts that are left over
It's the
that they
cheeks. It's
and
cheeks, ear, and tongue mixed with garlic and pepper and salt, like
yeah,
molded.
yeah, and it's held together with this gel, and I've had it in lunch meat form where it's not too bad, but whatever my parents used to bring home when I was a kid, um, they never made me eat that, which is good because it looked terrible, and I couldn't believe that they ate it. But again, growing up as a kid on the farm, you ate whatever, otherwise you go to bed hungry. So my dad learned that when he was a kid, and he liked eating that stuff. He would eat some of the nastiest stuff, um, like smelt, which is are these little fishes that you I don't even know where he got them from, but it is terrible smelling, terrible tasting. Uh, they'd eat lutefisk. To this day, I will not touch lutefisk. It smells bad. Your mom likes lutefisk, Andrew, but I won't touch it. Now, lefse I was fine with because that's just kind of like a tortilla that tastes like potatoes. So I was okay with lefse, but um, all this stuff came from my grandparents and probably their parents. It goes back generations and generations. My parent, not my grandparents. Let me get this right now. I think it would have been my grandparents' grandparents came over from Germany in the 1800s sometime. So there were maybe three generations of my family when I came along. No, probably four generations of my family when I was born. And now, of course, there's more. But um, yeah, they came from Germany and they brought all these traditions with them. Um, I can remember my grandma one time telling me that when she was a little girl, that her dad had a whiskey still. Now that was illegal back. I mean, you could not make your own booze and sell it, it was against the law. It was called bootlegging, and there was all kinds of laws against it. And um, she made shine. She said that's what they called it. It was called moonshine, which basically is whiskey. And she said she made shine when she was a little girl, and she was a bootlegger, which she transported it because they would sell the moonshine, all very illegal, and it was a big thing though in the 1920s, 1930s, and you did that to survive. So if you got caught, you went to jail, but those people out in the middle of nowhere in the country, they had clever ways of hiding stuff like that. So yeah, I just remember that. Yeah, that my grandma was a bootlegger, made moonshine. So,
Oh, what you said about head cheese and other stuff, that's exactly what I felt when you would eat Braunschweiger as a kid. Like still to this day, that smell, looking at it, seeing that spread on saltine crackers, like grosses me out so much. Like I thought it was salami. Like I just thought that was the name of it because there's like summer sausages and salami. And I remember seeing you eat this stuff. And I just kind of thought it was salami because one time, I don't know if you ever heard this story, but like Eric ended up in Children's Hospital because of strep throat or something really bad that he had. I didn't know that's why he was in Children's Hospital because we had this gate that you guys put in front of the stairs to block off like us climbing down, like one of those child-proof gates. And one time Eric like stubbed his toe really bad on that. And this was 2 days before he ended up in Children's Hospital. So I thought as a kid, he ended up in the hospital because he stubbed his toe. And he was asking me for help. Like, I can't walk. Like, my toe hurts really bad. Can you please help me out? And for some reason, I got the whiff of Braunschweiger on him. And I was like, no, I'm not going to help you because you smell like salami. And like, let him crawl to his bed by himself. And then 2 days later, we're in Minneapolis, like at the Children's Hospital. And I thought that's at the time, I thought that's because I didn't help him. And now, like, his toe was getting removed or something. Um, it's so weird how your sometimes your memories and stuff you say makes me think of some random thought. And I wanted to ask you, you said you have plenty of memories. So like I do have a question that I kind of want to play with you real quick. But before we get to that, is there just stories that you want to just share and say out loud that you remember from your grandparents?
well, I remember I remember going fishing with my grandpa. Um, I'm guessing my dad was with my grandpa. If I remember my grandma told me a story once that if somebody invited my grandpa to go fishing, uh, my grandpa would get up at 4 in the morning, have the coffee going, and and he would be at the front door waiting for this person to pick him up by 6 a.m. because he loved fishing that much. Um, and he really couldn't go out. I mean, he couldn't maneuver a boat by himself with one arm. But if someone said, "Hey, I'll take you fishing out in the boat," uh, my grandpa was so excited. He got up early. He was ready to go, and and you know, cursed be that person that was late if they weren't there to pick up my grandpa at 6 o'clock because he'd be ready to go, and so he loved going out in the boat and fishing, and he could bait his own hook with one hand and drop his line and I don't remember how he would hold the pole. Um, if he had some kind of contraption to put the pole in so he could reel the other end or reel with the other arm. I think that's what it was, or either that or he he held the fishing pole between his legs and was able. He did have a hook that he would wear once in a while. Maybe that's it. Maybe he was able to hold on to the fishing pole with his hook. He didn't wear that all the time, but occasionally I would see him with his hook, and he would maybe reel it in with the other hand, with his good hand. So, yeah, fishing was no problem with him, and he would catch big fish. He just he knew how to do everything so well. And you think, when you're growing up, you always think your dad is the smartest guy, and that your dad knows everything. But when I would see my grandpa do things, I just thought, you know, he was he was the guy. He was the one that taught my dad, so he must know more than my dad, and he could do more than my dad because he only had one arm when he was doing it. So he could just do so many cool things. One time I was my dad's bar. I got a bug up my butt that the ceiling at my dad's bar was all full of cigarette grime. That's back when you could smoke indoors, and so I started cleaning the ceiling with straight ammonia, and which I don't know why I did that because that's not good to inhale. It's not good for that stuff to get in your eyes. And and my grandpa came out and he would get up on a step ladder and help me. I'd be on one step ladder. He brought his own step ladder and set it up. And so he would put his rag down and he'd squirt the ceiling with ammonia and put the ammonia down and grab his rag and scrub the ceiling. My grandpa and I were scrubbing the ceiling of the bar, getting all the cigarette grime off the ceiling. And yeah, my grandpa was the only one that helped me with that. My dad didn't help me. My mom didn't help me. Well, my mom didn't like ladders. My brother didn't help me. Yeah, but my grandpa and we cleaned the ceiling at the Boardman bar, and it was so cool, that my grandpa was out there helping me clean the ceiling.
So, like I said, I have a question, like a little game I want to play with you, but I guess like I don't really have any other questions, so I'll save that. If like you said you have tons of stories, is there just like stuff that comes to your mind when it's like seasonal or when you were in middle school or high school when it comes to your grandparents
Well,
specifically?
I remember one time, uh, my grandpa went to California with my aunt Diane, and so grandma was by herself with my aunt Darlis, and for some reason I asked if I could come and stay with them in Star Prairie at the house, and I don't remember why. I don't remember why I wanted to do that, um, but it was really fun just spending time with my grandma. Oh, I do remember, Andrew. Since my grandpa was away in California, my grandma asked me if I'd come and mow the lawn. And and so I said, "Oh, that's a pretty big lawn. I mean, you got the front yard and then this huge backyard that went down to the river. And you know what river I'm talking about because it's the same river that we used to baptize people in at church. Uh, uh, so it was I think what I did is I went down there and I mowed the front yard the first day because it took a long time. And then I wound up spending the night there and I mowed the backyard the next day. So that's what it was. I spent, I spent a day and a half there and, and I can remember spending the night and just talking with my grandma and she made me a meal. I don't remember what it was now. Um, but it was that I think that was the first time, and I would have been probably about 16 then. That was the first time that I had ever spent the night at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Because when I was a real little kid, whenever we drove out from St. Paul to visit them, it was always a 1 day shot. Um, or at the very least, we would maybe get a hotel in New Richmond to spend the night if it got to be too late. But we never spent the night at Grandma and Grandpa's house. So when I was 16, it was the very, very first time I had ever spent the night there, which I thought was really cool. And waking up the next morning and and she made breakfast for me, and then I went out and mowed the lawn, and that took a long time. And since they lived right by a river, I'm mowing the lawn, Andrew. Okay, I'm just pushing the lawn more. I'm going along, and all of a sudden, a snake jumps out of the grass. Now I had never encountered a snake before while mowing the lawn. I had seen snakes, but I would never have anything to do with snakes. Snakes and I don't get along. I just don't want to have anything to do with them. I'm fine with spiders, but don't get me messed around with snakes. So I'm mowing the lawn, and all of a sudden this snake slithers through the grass, and I think I jumped 2 feet backward with the lawnmower in my hand, and because the lawnmower left the ground. Well, both of us left the ground because I just went whoa, and I jumped back, and the lawnmower went with me. And good thing I didn't fall down because the lawnmower would have landed on my legs. Um, and then I saw the snake slither away, and it's like that kind of took the fun out of it because then I'm mowing the lawn really slow, because I don't want to encounter another snake, not thinking that one could come up behind me. I was just watching for something going on in front of me. And I don't know where that snake went. Hopefully he went back in the river. Um, but but I told my grandma later about that. She said, "Oh yeah, we had a real big one come right up to the house and crush my violets or whatever plant she had outside the window." And she said, "I was looking at it outside the window, and it was pretty good size, and he just crushed my violets." And I said, "Well, what did you do?" And she said, "Well, nothing." What are you going to go outside and say, "Shoo, snake, shoo, shoo"? So, um, yeah, that was the only time I had spent the night at the house, as a kid anyway. Later, when your older brother was little, my wife and I spent the night there after my grandma had passed away. We spent one night there. But as a kid, that was the only time I spent the night there, and it was a lot of fun. And when Grandpa came back, he was glad that I had mowed the lawn, and he said, "Did you use the riding mower?" And I said, "I don't know how to ride that thing." So I just used the push mower that he had and did the whole lawn with that.
Do you remember that trip, or like, do you remember where you stayed? Like, did they have a guest bedroom? Do you remember what you had for dinner the night before, or what you made for breakfast in the morning?
Well, for breakfast, she made me eggs and bacon and toast, and just standard. But it, you could probably agree with this, Andrew, that whenever somebody else makes you eggs and bacon, it always tastes better. I don't know why, but when I make myself eggs and bacon, it's like, yeah. But when someone else makes it for you, it's like the best eggs and bacon you ever had. So yeah, I do remember that, and I don't remember what she made me for supper that night, but yeah, she was a great cook, and I think she had fresh cinnamon rolls, and they were really good. There's nothing better than a fresh cinnamon roll in the morning. So she asked me if I wanted coffee, and I said no, just some juice if you have it. And and I don't remember if she had juice or not. I think so. Um, but I might have just had a glass of water too. I don't know, but that's not important. The fact that you know my grandma took care of me for a day and a half, even though she didn't have to. I was there to do a job, but she appreciated what I was doing, so she took care of me. That was really cool.
Would she make cinnamon rolls out of potato water?
I don't know if she did or not. I think that's more a thing. I know what you're referring to because your mom, my wife, used to make potato buns out of potato water. But I think that's something that she got from her mom. Well, I know it's something she got from her mom. I don't remember my grandma ever doing anything like that.
So I eat mashed potatoes now, and that is crazy because I never, ever, ever, ever like mashed potatoes. But what you've been talking about of like you kind of make something from scratch almost. You have this vegetable, this fruit, this vegetable. You grab this spice, you mix it up, and then you saute. Um, I love my girlfriend so much, but she is like, despite of that, she's an amazing cook. Like, that's not the reason why I love her, is what I should say. Because she'll make anything just like I'll mention something, thinking we're gonna probably get it for the frozen aisle, and she'll find some way or some recipe or some remedy that she has or saw growing up to make this from scratch. And now, like the way she makes mashed potatoes, it's amazing. Like I actually really enjoy eating mashed potatoes the way she makes it. And I was just telling her last week of because we had like steak and mashed potatoes. I was like, "Do you make cinnamon rolls out of this?" And she kind of looked at me. I was like, I never liked mashed potatoes as a kid, but anytime I would see my mom like mash them up and make a huge thing of mashed potatoes, it grossed me out. But I knew within 2 days I was going to have cinnamon rolls or potato buns because she would mix them all up, let it like sit by the furnace, it would rise up, and then she would make it. I always thought that was so cool. Like, despite how gross that was for dinner, I would not touch mashed potatoes. I would get cinnamon rolls out like patience for that. So that's why I was curious if your grandma made things like that, or if there was something that you remember that, ew, that's gross. I don't want to touch it, which you said about a handful of foods, but then you knew you were maybe going to rather they were going to make something else out of it, or that same night they were going to serve something that you did look forward to.
I don't recall anything like that, but I do remember my grandma making her own bread. And again, that's a very old-fashioned type thing. Well, in the Bible, you hear all the time about how they made bread
Yeah.
using yeast and whatever grain and whatever else they use to make bread. I mean, I have no idea. I just buy a loaf at the grocery store and I'm good. But again, back in the 1920s and 1930s, you didn't always have a grocery store to run to. You made your own bread. You had grain that you whatever you have to do to grain to make it into bread with yeast and uh, and and the same dough that you make for bread you use for cinnamon rolls. So that's how she used to make her cinnamon rolls out of that same dough that she used to make the bread. Uh, I wish I could tell you how she did it. Uh, I wish I would have paid more attention to stuff like that growing up, because I didn't. And and now that's unless there's still a relative out there somewhere that knows how to do it, you know, those those types of uh, recipes and things like that are dead and gone. And it's really sad, Andrew, because those are things that should have been shared and written down and practiced. So, you mentioned your girlfriend knows how to do these wonderful things that she probably learned from her mom. And I hope that that tradition continues somehow. If she were to ever have a child someday, that she would pass that along, because it's really sad when these older people pass away and all those secrets and recipes that they had in their head for years and years and years and years were never written down, so nobody knows how to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I'm curious, was that the train going by? What was that noise?
Uh, no, there's not a train, but I think the park is really busy today. I can hear pickleball going on over there, and I can hear kids over on the dock over there, the public dock. So they're probably fishing. But yeah, it's just a lot of noise coming from the park.
So, this is actually, we're going to do this question now. It's kind of like a game. You can close your eyes if you want while we play this, but we're going to go through the five senses. I'm just going to ask you a sense, and the first thing that pops in your mind that you remember when it comes to your grandma or grandpa, let me know. So when it comes to smell, what's the first thing that you think of when it comes to your grandparents and smell?
Well, the first thing I ever remember smelling was Thanksgiving dinner and walking in and smelling the turkey and the dressing. And my grandma made homemade dressing, which she stuffed the turkey with, and and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I don't know, again, don't know what the recipe was, don't know what she used, but turkey is turkey. Everyone has their own way to prepare it, but there's so many different ways to make stuffing. Some people call it dressing, and smelling that for the first time, uh, it must have been how our dog Sable felt whenever we had Thanksgiving. You just knew that smell as soon as you walked into the house. You knew that smell. And the second thing would be whatever baked goods, and usually cinnamon rolls. Walking in and smelling cinnamon rolls. I mean, what a wonderful smell. I mean, there's not a lot of things in this world, Andrew, that smell as good as a fresh cinnamon roll coming out of the oven.
What about your grandpa, though? Is there any scent when it comes to him?
Well, no, not really. Uh, he I don't think he wore any type of aftershave or anything like that. Uh, I mean, I know he shaved. He never had a beard or a mustache as long as I knew him. He was always clean shaven. So, um, my dad used to use aqua velva, uh, which was kind of a thing in the 60s and 70s. I don't know if they still make aqua velva. They probably do. Uh, but I just remember my dad shaving and then sprinkling this green stuff in his hand and going like rubbing it between his hands and then slapping his face like this. And I think I did it one time and it burned. So, um, that's maybe be something. I'm assuming my grandpa also used aqua velva. So uh yeah, it's as far as smells with my grandpa, I don't really remember anything.
Is that like the Home Alone bit? Is that what he's using on his face when he screams?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what he's using.
Okay. What about that's funny because my grandpa, my mom's dad, I remember for Christmas, I was like 5 years old, and I do remember she got the other aftershave. I think it's called Brute, like in that green bottle with the really long neck. And so
Yeah.
every time I smell that, like I could just be in the like Walmart or a store and like take off the cap and smell it. And I actually do remember that my grandpa only from that Christmas because she always said that he liked like a meat and cheese, like a salami or cheese basket, and that aftershave is like what they liked. And Neapolitan ice cream. Those were like his things that he liked for his birthday and Christmas. I haven't even thought about that until now. What about sound when it comes to your grandparents? What's something you hear that reminds you of them?
Well, my grandparents always had a well, I shouldn't say always, but the two dogs that I remember were Chihuahuas, and my grandparents liked Chihuahuas. Now, Chihuahuas are a real little dog. They kind of look like a hamster on steroids. They're not very big, but they have a really distinctive bark. Uh, just this loud, sharp bark.
Like yip.
Uh, yip,
Yeah.
yip. And so as soon as you walk in the house, you know that's what you would hear. You would hear the yip 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 yip. Uh, and one of their chihuahuas' name was Bambi, and Bambi died, and then they got another chihuahua named Bibi. So those are the two chihuahuas I remember are Bambi and Bibi, and and uh, yeah, like I said, they never had the radio on. They didn't watch TV that much. So when you would walk in, it would always be quiet until their little chihuahua would start barking. So that would be the sound that I would associate with going to Star Prairie to see my grandparents.
See, I thought you were going to say like a country song or like a quote or like because like older people always had like this old timey phrase that they would say. So I didn't know if there was going to be like a certain word or like a song. That's funny. I was not expecting Chihuahua. Uh,
Well, my grandma, um, she had a very backwards way of talking. Um, Now, I don't know if either of my grandparents were educated. By that, I mean, I don't know if they graduated from high school. I don't think my grandma did. Um, she she was pregnant at age maybe 16 or 17 with my dad. So I don't believe she graduated high school. Um, and she just had a real backwards way of talking. And she'd be telling a story, and then she wasn't sure how the story. Uh, it, she would always say, she would finish the story, and then she would say, yeah, but I don't know nothing either too. And I'm going, what? I don't know nothing either too. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing. And she said it all the time. It's like, yeah, but I don't know nothing either too.
What the?
I'm going, what does that mean? You know? And when I started dating um, my wife, your mom, I told her that, and she said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." And uh, she only met your mom only met my grandma one time before she died of cancer, and and at that time she just had a handkerchief around her head because she had already completed chemo and her hair was gone, and she wasn't going to make it. Um, so she knew she didn't have long to live, but she was back at home until she got really bad, and and sure enough, my grandma as your mom was sitting there, my grandma said, "Yeah, but I don't know nothing either, too." And I'm going, "You see?" And so to this day, Andrew, I don't know what nothing either too means, but that's what my grandma always used to say, and I'll never forget that. Just she would talk and tell stories about people, and always finish the story by saying, "Yeah, but I don't know nothing either too."
That
Oh,
makes me that makes me want to break it down of like, okay, so I don't, so she
I
doesn't,
don't.
and then
I,
nothing, so she does know, so I don't know nothing. So
yeah, it that nothing either too. So I mean, the grammar is absolutely horrible. I mean, it's filled with um, uh, you know, prepositions and things that are all out of whack. And I don't know where she ever came up with that, but but it's well, like this guy I work for at Pete's Pizza, on purpose likes to say, I made it much more better. I mean, he knows he's saying it wrong, but he just does it to get people fired up, like, learn how to talk, but in my grandma's case, I think she actually thought she was speaking it the right way. And we don't even know what she was trying to say. If she was just trying to say, but yeah, I don't know for sure. Maybe that's what it was. Now that I think it, maybe that's what she was trying to say, Andrew, is I don't know for sure, but it came out, I don't know nothing either too.
it's like
So,
two wrongs make a right because saying I don't know nothing is saying I do know something. And so
right,
like I do know nothing, but she's saying she doesn't know nothing. Um,
right. That's
what
what I'm
about
saying. It's a double negative, and it doesn't make any sense. But she said it all the time.
so what about your grandpa? Is there a sound? Is it like the pounding of a hammer or like a lawnmower? Is there
Well,
something that kind of reminds you of a memory of your grandpa when you hear it?
well, he never really said a whole lot. Um, he would just smile, and and Grandma would say, "Yeah, he's got his hearing aid in, but he's got it turned off." And I remember one time, uh, well, I guess it was the only time when I had your mom with me to meet my grandparents, and and Grandma would say something like that oh he can't hear us, he's got his hearing aid turned down, and my wife, your mom, would look at Grandpa, and he would have this smile on his face, and and she she told me about this later, and she said he could hear just fine. He just didn't want to answer. And he just wanted Grandma to think that he wasn't paying attention, but he could hear just fine. And your mom, Andrew, picked up on that and told me about it. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're right. So and he had the best smile. He didn't have a big toothy grin. He just had this great smile, and just a wonderful, good looking older man. He lived till he was 82, I think. Grandma died at 78 or 79, again of cancer. Grandpa, he passed away. Uh, I think he had a bleeding ulcer that they couldn't fix because once you start talking about bleeding ulcers in your stomach when you're that old, you can't really repair organs that you can't really sew them together anymore. I mean, you could try, um, but I'm not really sure if that's what he died of. But uh, yeah, it was just kind of sad because he died in a hospital bed, and 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 I remember we brought in uh, our only son at the time, and we held him up to see Grandpa lying in the hospital bed, and and your brother Brett, my oldest son, started pounding on the railing on the bed, Grandpa, because he Brett knew it was Grandpa, and and my grandpa wasn't really responding to anybody at this point, but he responded to Brett and my son, and it really perked him up. And at that time, I think that was the only great grandson that was available anyway. There was maybe somebody else, but um, not from my family. Brett was the first great grandchild from my family anyway, and and so uh, and I haven't thought about that till just now. That when my grandpa was in his final days, the thing that perked him up was seeing my son, you know, pounding on the railing on the bed, going Papa or Grandpa or whatever, and 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 that just this big smile and this big grin and yeah, that was so cool. And then I remember the family asked if I could bring Brett back because that was the only thing that perked them up. And I said, we're heading back to, at the time we lived in Alexandria, Minnesota. So I said, we're heading back. And so, yeah, that was really cool to hear. And it was really cool to see as well as that was my last memory of my grandpa because a week later, my dad called me and said that he had passed away.
That was my next question. Sight. If there's something that you see and it reminds you of your grandma and grandpa, like if you see somebody with a really big smile, is that like does that remind you of your grandpa or is it something else that you remember?
Just always seeing my grandpa with one arm. And as long as I can remember, he had one arm. Well, I think during my whole lifetime, he only had one arm, and just uh, always wondering uh, how that happened. I said, was he born with one arm? And my dad said, no. When he was a young man, he was trying to fix a corn picker, and these things must have really been a wicked farm machinery thing. Uh, and and you certainly don't want to reach into it when it's running, but he reached into it and wound up losing his arm, and they did. I mean, he would have bled to death if the people around him didn't pull him away from the corn picker and put pressure where his arm was, to keep him from bleeding to death. So he's very fortunate he didn't die as a young man. And I think I told the story in a previous episode, Andrew, of my dad also almost being pulled into a corn picker when it got a hold of his belt. And 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 fortunately, there were two people standing next to my dad that held on to him, and the corn picker ripped the pants right off of him, and he was standing there in the field, in the middle of the field in his boxer shorts, because his corn picker he got a hold of his belt, ripped his pants right off him, and fortunately, two guys were holding on to him. Otherwise, he would have been pulled right into the corn picker, and I wouldn't be here doing the show with you right now. So I don't know what a corn picker looks like or how it work. I know what it looks like, but I don't know how it worked. But you would always hear of people that were losing arms or being killed by corn pickers. And unfortunately, in today's society, our farmers use much safer equipment to go and pick corn with.
You have like a mosquito or something like right there, by the
Yep.
way. You didn't get it. So if you see someone with one arm that thinks about your grandpa, is there a sight that makes you think of your grandma?
Just always seeing her in her easy chair. Whenever we'd come to visit, she would head to her easy chair, and and that was her chair to sit and visit in. And she always had this this clock behind her that my parents gave her of of uh, of of Jesus uh, uh, knocking on a door or about to knock on a door, and and my parents gave that to her sometime in the 70s, and I wound up with that clock. I have it to this day. It's in my living room now, but my parents gave that to my grandma at some point in the 70s for her birthday or Mother's Day or Christmas or something, and to this day I still have that clock, and sometimes when I see that clock I remember that, oh yeah, yeah, my grandma uh, had that clock, and I wound up with it after she passed away, which is really cool that I still have the beat up wishing well in my front yard and the Jesus clock in my living room.
I remember it like I got dibs on that, by the way. Like I remember that clock. That again, that yellow house. I remember sitting on the ground and seeing that clock. We had this giant entertainment center with our VCR and our TV, and like this pull-out thing that had like VHS tapes underneath. And I remember that clock off to the side. My last two. What about taste? Is it just like rhubarb, or that kind of reminds you of your grandparents, or like sometimes you taste the smell, like if you walk into it outside. So what would you say reminds you of your grandparents?
Well, I guess I associate taste and smell together,
Okay.
and the first time uh, having Thanksgiving dinner, um, and actually I remember trying. It was the one and only time, Andrew, that I had mincemeat pie. Now, mincemeat pie is very German,
Okay.
and both my grandparents were full-blooded Germans. So my dad was full-blooded German, which makes me half German. Um, and and I remember trying mincemeat pie. I mean, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it had actual meat in it, uh, but it had some kind of weird spice in it, and I didn't like it. So I guess that was my first memory. And yeah, I had turkey and dressing and stuff before I had the pie, but I guess I remember trying this mincemeat pie because I'd already had turkey and dressing. I mean, I knew what that stuff tasted like, but I had never had mincemeat pie before. So the first time I ever tried it was at Grandma's house, and that was the last time I ever tried it. I've never had mincemeat pie since then, and I can't even describe to you, Andrew, what it tastes like, but I didn't like it, and I couldn't tell you why I didn't like it, but it it was some kind of a weird spice pie, and I'll never touch it again.
Is it? I thought it was made out of nuts.
I don't know. Yeah, it could be. There maybe was nuts in it. I don't really know. That'd be something. I mean, if you want to Google and see what mincemeat pie contains, that would be fine. But
Mix.
I
It's a mix of apples, dried beef, raisins, sugar, and broth with pickle juice.
pickle juice
The
and
main thing is raisins, apples, and a bunch of spices with dill.
but you said dried meat, and I don't know what kind of meat she used, but maybe that's what turned me off. But uh, yeah, it was just a very weird tasting pie. And you said you're not a pie person, so you'll probably never try it either. But I like pie. Her pumpkin pie was amazing. I remember I tasted that right after the mincemeat pie, and that was like night and day. I mean, that was a total contrast, between good and bad. The pumpkin pie she made was homemade and absolutely wonderful. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better pie.
Did she ever make pecan pie?
She did one year, and that was really really good. It was really rich, and I can remember my mom only let me have a really thin slice because it was very rich, and I can remember my grandma saying too that yeah, Grandpa can't have a lot of that either, otherwise he'll be up all night. She didn't tell me why, but uh, I think grandmas just say that about grandpas anyway. That yeah, don't eat too much of that, or you'll be up all night. And uh, that's a beautiful thing about having grandparents is some of the things they say to each other, and it's like, are they fighting? Or, it's it, it was a wonderful experience in the 70s growing up with these two. And one last story I want to share is when I was learning to drive. Uh, my dad didn't really have a decent vehicle that I could learn to drive in, and I was scheduled to take my driving test on a certain day in 1977 or 78. I think it was 78, and so um, um, I asked my grandparents if I could use their car to practice in and then take my driving test. Well, wouldn't you know, on my very backing it out of their garage, um, they had some kind of a wheelbarrow ornament that was right at the edge of the driveway. So while I was backing the car out of the driveway, I could feel something impeding my ability to back up. And 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 Grandma said, "I think you're stuck on the wheelbarrow." It was this big decoration. It wasn't an actual wheelbarrow. Well, maybe it used to be, but now it was a decoration. So I jumped out of the car, and sure enough, I had caught um, the handle on this big old wheelbarrow thing, and it took the side panel above the front wheel and bent it straight out. And this was like a newer car, and I felt terrible. I mean, my grandpa came out and he tried to bend it in with his knees, and he got it in pretty good, but I mean, it was, I mean, you could see a definite, you know, thing, or could see a definite bend in the side of the car that I created. And my grandma said, "Oh, that's okay. I bump into that thing all the time, and I always tell Grandpa to move it, and he never does." And but I felt terrible, and I drove around and got used to the car so I could take my driver's test. But the whole time I kept thinking that, guy, I wrecked my grandma and grandpa's car. My first time driving this car, and they're being so nice and letting me borrow it so I could try to get my driver's test, and I blew it right away. Just backing out of their garage, I wasn't even in the car a minute, and I wrecked it. And so the next day I took my driver's test, and I was still kind of thinking about that, and I still wasn't that familiar with the car, so I failed the test. Uh, and I didn't take another driver's test uh, I think that just wrecked my confidence, and so I never uh, took a driver test for a year. I waited a year before I took it again, and then I passed. But yeah, just I felt terrible, and they were so good about it, and they knew I felt bad, and they felt bad because they said that wheelbarrow decoration shouldn't have been there, and that it wasn't my fault, but it was my fault, and I felt terrible, and it just wrecked my confidence, and but I'm forever grateful that they didn't make a big deal about that or make my dad pay for it or anything like that, and or make me pay for it because I didn't have any money, and yeah, that it's kind of a sad story, but that's one of the last things I remember about spending time with both of them when they let me use their car to learn how to drive, and I wrecked it.
Um, yeah, I mean, we can end on that note. It's funny, there's just random stuff that you say, like, we did this episode. I mean, we haven't done touch yet. But you were just talking about a moment ago, the taste thing. I don't know if you had a taste that reminded you of like your grandpa or anything like that. But when we did an episode on TV way back when, you talked about this commercial for, I don't remember what medicine it was, but like it was like a commercial of like this guy in the foot in the bed, like, why did I eat that? I shouldn't have eaten that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was a commercial for Alka-Seltzer,
That
and
reminds me of what you were just talking about, your grandparents of like, oh, he'll be up all night, like the
yeah,
Alka-Seltzer thing. Like,
yeah, yeah. There used to be an old commercial where a guy is sitting at the edge of the bed going, "I can't believe I ate the whole thing," and then you hear his wife go, "You ate it, Ralph." And he kept saying it, and then finally he takes a couple of tablets of Alka-Seltzer so he can sleep. I don't know why that commercial would remind you of my grandparents, but um,
Because
yeah,
you said because you said your grandma will always say like, "Oh, if he eats that, he'll be up all night."
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I guess so. I don't know if they had Alka-Seltzer in the house or not, but um, so those are some memories of my grandparents, and I hope it was entertaining for you, Andrew, and for those of you listening, and uh, because a lot of us have lost our grandparents long ago, and we don't always think about them until we maybe see something like a Jesus clock in your living room, or a dilapidated wishing well in your front yard, and you remember that. Oh yeah, yeah, got that from Grandpa, and matter of fact, I used to have this contraption downstairs in the laundry room that I'd hang my shirts on, and it was kind of this beat up old aluminum triangular thing that I would hang my shirts on when they come out of the dryer. And last fall, my daughter decided to buy me a new one of those, and and put it together and hang my shirts up. And I said, "Well, what'd you do with the old one?" And she said, "I threw it away." And I said, "I got that from my grandparents." And she said, "Oh, well, you can go get it out of the garbage." She said, "I didn't know that." And I said, "No, it's okay. I mean, it was old and it was falling apart." Uh, but you you think about things like that, like uh, don't ever throw anything away, without asking, because that might have some connection to it or some memory that brings you back 50 or 60 years. You don't know, what 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 you might associate with something, and I know that Jesus clock will never be thrown away. Andrew, you said you've got dibs on it. Good. I hope you give it to somebody someday so that it just keeps going, because it's a great clock. I mean, it's in perfect shape. It's the wishing well probably won't make it wherever I move next. It probably won't go with me, but there's other things in the house. Like uh, your mom's Uncle Martin made that little desk that's sitting in the garage, and he made it specifically for your brothers and sisters, Andrew. So those are something that things like that you just never want to throw away or give away, because they mean something. So uh, things that are passed on from previous generations are getting far and few between. So always be careful of what you throw away or what those memories are. And I hope the show today made you, the listener, maybe think about grandma and grandpa on both sides. Maybe you only had one grandpa you remember, or both grandpas or both grandmas you remember, but there's always something about them that you remember, and maybe you haven't thought about it for a long time, but that's the purpose of why we do this show, to help you remember things, not only from the 70s, but just from growing up. And we hope we did that today. So, Andrew, I'm going to say goodbye from New Richmond, because here in my outdoor studio, the bugs are just killing me. So, why don't you talk about our sponsors, and we'll see you again next week.
I'm just going to wrap up actually today's episode. Thank you, everybody. Follow us on YouTube and listen to our past episodes on That 70s Pod. You have our sponsors in the description below. And I'm gonna end on this. Bryan, thank you for your memories, and you always are able to like have good memories of whatever you're describing. And um that Jesus clock, everything about it reminds me of just like memories, and not even knowing I had that connection to your grandparents. Thank you guys for listening. And I ordered Chinese food before we started recording today, and I just opened up the fortune cookie, and I'm gonna end today's episode on this fortune. Love transcends words, but but it's understood through actions. Love trans I'm gonna do it one more time. Love transcends words, but it's understood through actions. And you said your grandma and grandpa, mostly your grandpa didn't say words often. He didn't really speak often, but his actions, especially that story with the car, definitely showed love and that they cared about you and the rest of the family. And we have love for you guys and the listeners. I have love for you, Dad. I am signing off actually from Houston, Texas tonight. I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm signing off. This has been episode 62. We'll catch you guys next week with a brand new topic as we're going to try to do 70 episodes of the 70s. And then who knows, we'll probably transfer to a different decade. But as Bryan mentioned, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Just remember, not that life is short, but you never know what memories you're making and what you're passing on. So every day is a gift, and don't forget about that. You guys have a good night, and we'll talk to you next week.